Welcome, everybody, to the Toronto Sports Rush channel, brought to you by Bet Rivers. I am joined live today for an NHL free agency special live edition. My name is Kyle Andrew. I am joined by EJ Hradek, lead NHL network analyst. EJ, lots has happened. I want to start in the Eastern Conference. I'm probably going to finish in the Eastern Conference, to be honest with you. But let's start with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the comings and goings with their roster, how they're reshaping things. Love to hear what you have to say about Mitch Marner and the Leafs able to salvage something from his leaving town.
Yeah, you said it. They were able to salvage something, and I think they were able to salvage a nice piece in Nicolas Roy. He's been for a while now. He's been one of my favorite kind of back end forwards on a really good team in Vegas. He was part of a Stanley Cup championship team there. 6'4", lanky, long, can be a fourth center, can play as a third center, can kill penalties, can be on your second power play unit, and has played in a ton of big games in his career. He's got at a very good price. They get him as part of this sign and trade with the Vegas Golden Knights. The bottom line is Mitch Marner was leaving. They were not going to get anything. And to your point, they salvaged it a little bit, I guess, by getting a player in return. But a player, I think, can be a helpful piece to the Toronto Maple Leafs moving forward. So, we've talked we talked all year long about the Mitch Marner situation. And you hate to lose a player of his ilk. He was a tremendous player for the Toronto Maple Leafs in his time there. It's kind of sad that the local kid wasn't able to be part of a team that could end a long Stanley Cup drought. I think, my feeling is that, that group was underserved by the previous manager and the previous head coach. I think that the franchise is on a much better track with this new administration. And, we'll see what they can do. But you hate to lose a player like Marner and have him leave town and not get anything, near in terms of what he has the ability to do. But they do get Nick Waugh to help their team. They were able to keep John Tavares at a very friendly price, so that was helpful. They were able to get Matthew Knies signed to a longer-term contract, so that was important. They've made a few little acquisitions around the edges. They bring in Maselli from Utah, who I would imagine is there to help them on the power play. So we will see if he can be a helpful player or not, but not a big, financial responsibility there. They made a couple of other small moves. And I think, Kyle, at the end of the day, what they want to do is position themselves to be prepared in season towards the deadline, like they were last year, to add some pieces to the puzzle, like the Florida Panthers did very successfully, adding Jones and Marchand. And you don't have that flexibility if you go out willy-nilly and add kind of pieces that you don't need. So this is still a very good team. Life after Mitch Marner will be different, but I think they still have every chance to be a better team next year, and we'll see what happens. I mean, things change over the course of time, so we'll see where things go from here.
Yeah, and I think it's been pretty clear for a while now. There was no opportunity to replace all 102 points and all of the things Marner brought to the table. It's going to be replacement by committee, which they have a roster to do. And like you said, some of these Maselli coming in, just they will pick up the slack. There's guys to pick up the slack and help reshape this team because it wasn't working as is. The ship has sailed on Marner for a while now, and they're trying to keep pace with the Florida team that, based on who they've re-signed, they're running it back almost as is, and there would be no reason for them not to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, we think about this past season, the Leafs won the division and they took the Florida Panthers to 7 games. Clearly, they were the team that gave the Florida Panthers the most trouble in their run to a second consecutive Stanley Cup. And if the Toronto Maple Leafs had done a few things differently in Game 3, if Mitch Marner had made a few better defensive decisions in Game 3, maybe they win that game and they're up 3-0 in the series. Not to say they would have won the series, because Florida, as we found, is really, really good. But they were close, and again, they will miss Marner. There is no question. He is a very, very talented player. But to your point, it hasn't worked to this point. You could say, hey, in the same division when Tampa was rolling, They were a problem. They were in the division with Boston. It was a really good team, problematic over the years, and now the Florida Panthers have eliminated them again. So, but these are good teams. They're not, it's one thing when we had that pod season when they lost to Montreal. Like, they should have won that series. They didn't. That's really disappointing. Some of these other series, they just lost to better teams. But things change. We didn't ever imagine Brad Marchand would be on the Florida Panthers like 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
We didn't think they were going to acquire Seth Jones. Players become available that can help your franchise. And if you're not flexible, you can't do anything about it. So I think the Leafs will be in a good position to have that flexibility to perhaps add important pieces as the season unfolds.
Yeah, and if you even look at their draft picks from the second, third, and fifth round this year, notably William Bell in the fifth round, they do seem to be positioning themselves more towards size. Looking at Waugh coming back this way, it seems as though they're really aligning themselves with the Berube style philosophy and building the team out in that direction, because they are addressing the shortcomings that were not allowed, that didn't allow them past a Florida team that plays a certain style of hockey, and a Florida team that has now re-signed Marchand, has re-signed Ekblad, has re-signed Bennett, completely retooled. They're ready to go again, and the Eastern Conference will continue to run through them.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, as we sit here on July 1st, it's hard to imagine that the Florida Panthers aren't going to be the team to beat again. And, they're a prohibitive favorite. But that said, I mean, this is a hard game. Guys get hurt. Guys underperform. I mean, it was all sunshine and roses for Brad Marchand to come there down the stretch and participate in the postseason. Like, how is that going to unfold during the regular season? Is he going to have, he's not a younger player. He's 37 years old. He's got a contract that runs through 43. I mean, they do it that way so they can make the cap money work. They stretch out the term. On paper right now, they are clearly the favorite and clearly the best team. But we are going to play a lot of games between, September when camps start and the playoffs beginning in April. And, we could have a whole different opinion about it when it comes to that point in time. I mean, heck, a lot of people thought the Tampa Bay Lightning were going to beat the Florida Panthers in the first round this year. In the end, they didn't really provide much of a challenge. They lost in 5. It was the Leafs that really pushed the Panthers. And in the end, the Panthers, being a great team, found a way to win. It'll be up to the Leafs now to try to figure out other ways to deal with a really, really strong Florida team.
So let's look around the rest of the Eastern Conference to see some of the other deals that have been made. Vladislav Gavrikov came from LA, signed a 7-year deal with the Rangers. How does that help the New York Rangers get better?
Well, I mean, he is a really good defenseman. He's got size and strength. He can slide right in next to Adam Fox as a first pair. He's a really good player. I mean, 7x7. We'll see how it works out over the course of the deal. I mean, he's got, I think, no move protection as well. I guess they never learn, right? They had they brought in Jacob Trouba several years ago, who was kind of a similar big, strong defenseman. And, 2/3 of the way through that deal, they wanted to trade him, and they had to go through all this, backbiting to get him to eventually leave and go to Anaheim. So they're hoping that it works out better in this case with Gavrikov. I don't think he provides a ton of offense, but he's a foil and a good foil for Adam Fox. And they got to hope Fox can rediscover his game. They're changing over their defense. They're trying to be a little bit bigger and stronger back there. It looks like they're going to move Keandre Miller out. Here in Carolina is the destination, if that has not happened already while we're having these conversations. So, I mean, the Rangers are still in a unique spot. I mean, they don't have what I would say is a really legit number one center, unless you want to count JT Miller, who can play center and wing. They got to get more out of Zibanejad moving forward. I'll be curious to see what other moves Chris Drury has up his sleeve. But, the New York Rangers, this is a team that missed the playoffs last year. They made a coaching change. They brought in Sullivan. But, I'm going to have to see it because some of their key guys are not getting any younger, right? I mean, Panarin is going into the final year of his contract. He's been really good for the Rangers. But, is he going to continue to be that good a player as we talk to him into his, mid-30s now? So time will tell. I think the Rangers have a few deals they want to make. But Gavrikov, on paper, it makes sense. Big, strong defenseman should fit nicely with Adam Fox.
Yeah, and assuming they do, in fact, end up making it official, Keandre Miller moving to the Canes. This is a Canes team that has also signed Logan Stankoven to 8 years, $48 million. So they're also loaded up now.
Yeah, well, I mean, they got Stankoven in that trade with Dallas for Rantanen, right? So, like, he seems to fit their system really well. He's a young player. He's not the biggest guy, but because he's a young player, there's still plenty of tread on the tires. I worry about him getting further along in his career, as you know, smaller guys who play the way he does tend to get beaten around a little bit and
Mhm.
suffer injury. But for now, I mean, I think Carolina, they wanted to make sure that this guy was going to be here. He was part of a huge trade. It makes perfect sense to do what they did. And they've got cap room to burn. So,
Yeah.
we'll see where they can go. If they can add another center to the mix, they've been forever seemingly trying to add a second center. Can they improve their goaltending? And how about the defense, where Orlov, it looks like he's leaving, and Brent Burns might be leaving via both those guys via free agency. If they get Miller, that helps, but are they going to do anything else? So, Carolina's got a good team, but again, when you're comparing teams to the Florida Panthers right now in the Eastern Conference, it's just not a good comparison.
Well, it's helpful for our sake. We have a very specific barometer by which to measure all
Yep.
these teams and all these deals. And it is just what it is. How about Ivan Provorov signing a 7-year, $59.5 million deal with the Blue Jackets?
Yeah, the Jackets wanted to get in on Noah Dobson. They put a pretty good package together for the Islanders, and in the end, Dobson wanted to go to Montreal, and the Islanders, were willing to do what the player wanted in that regard. So the Blue Jackets were out in that particular situation. So as all these things are, you have Plan A, B, C, D. You get all the way down to Z sometimes with guys moving around this league. They fell back, and they have Provorov, who's been a good player for them, and they decided to up the ante and sign him to the long-term deal. They keep their four defensemen at the top of their lineup together moving forward, and they're trying to push and get into a playoff spot. They added Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood from the Colorado Avalanche, and you know they're hoping that experience, that size, that grit at the back of the roster with some really good young players is going to be enough to push them over the hump. They're going to have to get better goaltending on a consistent basis. They're hoping that young Jet Greaves is going to be the answer to that problem.
I'm being told by Monzo in my ear right now that the holdup on the Miller trade is actually about signing an extension with the Canes on
Okay.
that. So that's probably just a slight delay as they hope to get things done in Carolina, I'm certain. Connor Brown's left Edmonton, returning to the East Coast as per his wishes to be closer to home in Toronto. Signed with the Devils, 4 years, $3 million per. What does that do for them?
Well, it's just another good back end player, can kill penalties, has played in some big games over the last 2 years now. So everybody has kind of gotten a look at Connor Brown. He's got his wheels back going again. He had a year where he signed in Washington and he got hurt very early in the season. I think played maybe 2 or 3 games for the Capitals and missed the entire season. He came back, he signed with the Oilers. He's friendly and played junior hockey with Connor McDavid. And by the end of that first season at Edmonton, he really found his legs again and was an important player for them in the playoffs. This year he's been, much the same. That's what he is. He's a back end forward that has some speed, that can kill penalties, that can give you a little punch once in a while offensively. But, that's what, they're so hard to find, players that can fill some of these roles. So he's a pretty defined player at this point of his career, and he should help the Devils back end group.
Mm-hmm. And the resurgence of Patrick Kane continues. He signed another 1-year deal with the Detroit Red Wings for $3 million. I think a lot of people were shocked at how, maybe shocked isn't the right word, just pleasantly surprised perhaps at how he managed to reassess himself in the NHL. Talk about him.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I was really impressed with the way he played last year. There were moments in some of the games last year in the second half of the season, I was like, boy, he is really playing at a high level. And that's, with Patrick Kane, that can be an awfully high level.
Yeah.
He's had to come back through that, very difficult surgery. He's found his way through it. Patrick is in a spot where he's now in Detroit. He's kind of halfway between Chicago, where he played most of his career and most of his life was spent there, or his adult life, and then halfway between there and Buffalo, where he grew up. So it's seemingly a good spot for him. He's liked it there. He's got Alex DeBrincat there, who he feels very comfortable playing alongside of. The Detroit Red Wings, I don't know. I mean, they're trying to kind of find their way. They went out and got John Gibson, that he should solidify their goaltending or at least give them a legitimate number one. But, Gibson has had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, and he hasn't played really in what I could call a big game probably in this decade. So, I mean, there is a little bit of risk attached to this move. I talked to Gibson today. He's excited about it and thinks that, sees it as a fresh start. But, the Detroit Red Wings, they're kind of on the clock now. They've been in this long rebuild, and I think Steve Yzerman has spent a lot of his personal capital there in Hockey Town. And, I think the fans are really expecting to see some results now, and it'll be interesting to see if they don't provide those results, and if this team can't finally make it back to the playoffs, what the future is for Yzerman in a place where he is beloved.
For sure. Jonathan Drouin to the New York Islanders on a 2-year deal. How does that help them?
Well, there's a connection there, right? Patrick Waugh coached Jonathan Drouin in junior years ago and is very familiar with Jonathan Drouin. And Matthew Darch, I believe, I don't know if he was in Tampa at the time that Jonathan Drouin was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning, but so there are some connections, most specifically Patrick Waugh. But, Jonathan Drouin was a pretty good player for the Avalanche, obviously benefited from playing alongside of his buddy Nathan MacKinnon. He's going to be away from him here with the Islanders, but the Islanders are looking for players like that can provide offense, that can have a little bit of a speed, can maybe help them on the power play, and they're thinking that maybe Drouin can do that. And I'm sure Patrick Waugh has told management there, listen, I know this guy, I can get a lot out of him, and they take a chance on a reasonable contract.
Yeah, it's fair. It's a good chance to take. And again, reasonable numbers. That's the name of the game right now for teams looking to build in the middle of the roster like that. Tanner Jeanette to the Bruins, 5 years, $3.4 million per.
Little bit much, I would say. I mean, he didn't do much in LA last year. Tanner Jeannot came in the league. He had that really good rookie season in Nashville, and he was scoring some goals, and he was in fights, and he was like a prototypical power forward. And he kind of came out of nowhere because he was not somebody that was on anybody's radar. Mm-hmm. And then he ended up getting traded to Tampa for like a bunch of draft picks. And Tampa had been so successful with those kind of moves, and this one really didn't work out for them. He went out to LA this past season and really didn't have a role with the LA Kings. So in Boston, they know they have to go through Florida and some of those tougher teams in the East. They want to be bigger, stronger, harder to play against. I mean, a 5-year commitment is kind of significant for me. I mean, I don't know why they felt the need to make a 5-year commitment to Tanner Jeannot, but they have. The 3.4 cap hit isn't the end of the world, but again, I mean, I think this guy had 11 points last year. To go down that road, to me, is very surprising. So, listen, maybe they'll be right, Kyle, and maybe he'll be able to kind of resuscitate his career, and they'll have a role for him to fill in. But if not, I mean, that's one of those ones you just shake your head and you start to think about, okay, when they're thinking about moving Don Sweeney out of the general manager's role, if moves like this don't work, that's what they'll talk about.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've covered most of the major deals that we've seen so far on the East side. I want to move over to the other conference and kind of conclude with you here on what I think we all kind of deem it to be more or less a feel-good story here. Jonathan Toews is back in the NHL, signing with the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one for me, Kyle, because, listen, I'm a big Jonathan Toews fan. He was a great player. He has 3 Stanley Cups. He's won at the Olympic level. He's won at all kinds of international tournaments. I think he was a Conn Smythe Trophy winner as well. He's going to be a Hall of Famer at the end of his career, but he hasn't played in a couple of years. So we don't really know where he's at. He goes home to Winnipeg, where he's from that area. So that's a feel-good story, as you mentioned. And, if he could come in and even, be, half of what he was at his best, I mean, he'd be a helpful player just because the intangibles he brings to the table. But,
right.
A best case scenario is he comes in and he can be a helpful second center there behind Mark Scheifele. But I'm really unsure. And I would say this is the thing that worries me about high profile players coming into teams, is if he can't play well, and if they have to start thinking about using him as a 4C, or they have to scratch him, these things become distractions. Yes. Joe Thornton was a great example in Florida at the very end of his career, right? He was being scratched. He was, in the lineup, out of the lineup. It becomes a story that really nobody wants to talk about, because like we all have respect for these guys as great players. I mean, Thornton is a Hall of Famer now. Jonathan Toews is going to be a Hall of Famer. So I'm rooting for him, Kyle. I'm hoping that he's going to be able to come in and play. He knows his body and his situation way better than anybody else does. The deal is really structured in terms of bonuses. So I don't think it hurts the team really too much that way. But like I said, if he can't play to the level that he expects, it does become a little bit of a distraction. And that's where I think it would be a negative. But we have really no way to know. He hasn't played in a couple of years. I'm really eager to see how things play out there, and I'm wishing him nothing but success. It would be a great story to see him come back and play well in his hometown.
Yeah, I imagine just about everyone feels the same. And the Winnipeg Jets being so similar to Toronto in the sense that there's something missing. Those intangibles you spoke of that they just can't quite get over the hump. To me, this is clearly them signing, looking for that experience, looking for a little locker room leadership. And if he happens to throw a few points up on the board too, that's a win-win situation. But I think, like yourself, all of us are cheering for him to do well there. Yeah. EJ, any other thoughts on the big day we had today?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Vancouver went out and they brought all their guys back. I mean, I didn't think there was any way Brock Besser was coming back there. There was a lot of talk at the trade deadline. There was like, the GM saying, well, you should have seen some of the offers. They weren't very good. It seemed like they were almost disparaging the player a little bit there. I thought that was a done deal. But in the end, I mean, everybody has great plans, Kyle, right? I'm sure Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin, and just like the guys in Toronto, they probably had the plan. Well, we'll get in on Bennett. We'll get in on Marchand. Well, these guys, they stay with the teams they're on more often than not because they're doing well and the teams want to keep them. So now these things don't become available. So for Vancouver, listen, let's keep the guy we know. I mean, Brock Besser scored 40 goals 2 years ago. He scored 25 last year. They're giving him 7.25 over 7 years. It's a lot. It's a lot of commitment, but he's one of their own. They know him. And, they're hoping he can continue to be a 30-goal guy for them. And as the cap continues to go up, that 7.25 might not look as onerous as it does right now. So we'll see. They brought back Connor Garland on a 6-year contract. That guy just works his rear end off all the time. He was part of the World Championship team with Team USA. He's in the battle, and so I'm really happy. That guy has earned everything that he's earned in this league. And then for Thatcher Demko, I mean, he's a really good goalie when he's healthy, and they signed him on a 3-year deal. They've got Lankin in there. They've got Sheloffs in the minors. This is a team that their minor league team just won the Calder Cup, so maybe they've got some other help coming from the minors. We'll see, but it was interesting to me that the Canucks really went heavy on keeping their players there today. So it tells you that if they can resuscitate Pettersson and get him back to being the player he was a couple of years ago, maybe the Vancouver Canucks are a player in the Pacific Division again. The LA Kings went out and got some experience on the blue line. They added Ceci and Brian Dumoulin. Brian Dumoulin, I thought was going to be out of the league last year. He goes to New Jersey. Because of injuries, he has to play a lot in that first-round series. He earned himself a 3-year contract worth $4 million per year. Yeah. Cody Ceci goes there as well. They bring in Corey Perry, hoping that the Corey Perry situation continues of bringing teams to the Cup final.
Why not take a chance just ahead of his 65th birthday, right?
Just ahead. I mean, the good news is when Social Security kicks in, right? Exactly. As much. I think there's an offset there. But, Corey Perry is I heard, Kyle, he wasn't too thrilled with the fact that the Oilers were willing to pay Trent Frederick such a long deal and $3.5 million per. And I think it got him thinking, I want to be paid a little bit more money. And so he kind of priced out of Edmonton, and LA jumped on him, and Kenny Holland had him. He was the guy that brought him to Edmonton 2 years ago. So, LA added a lot of depth, veteran-type players to their team, Joel Armia and other guys. So, we'll see if that is something that's big for them. And obviously, Vegas, they get Mitch Marner, but Pietrangelo is going to have to retire. So that's a hard thing to fill. And, I think Eichel is going to stay there on a longer-term deal. But, if Eichel, for some reason, decides to depart, I mean, now you have no center to go with Marner. Then you almost wonder, what do you have Marner for? So, I think Eichel will stay. I don't know what the term. I think that, like McDavid, he may do a shorter-term deal to stay in his current address. But, those are things to consider for all these teams. And, You know, Dallas made it official with Glenn Gulleton today. I'm not, Dallas to me, I don't know if they're taking a step forward right now. We'll see what other moves they decide to make. But it'll be interesting. That Western Conference is tough. There's some really good
Yeah.
teams, and I'll leave you with this. I mean, which July 1st, there's 3 months until the season starts. Sidney Crosby's in Pittsburgh today. Will he be in Pittsburgh on October 1st? We'll find out.
That is about as good as cliffhangers get, folks. And well, I have no choice, but in broadcasting standards, I have to leave you with that. Thank you once again for tuning in. This has been the NHL Free Agency Update Live. My name is Kyle Andrew. I was joined, of course, by the wonderful EJ Hradek. We will see you again soon.